we're gonna take a second look at the Storm King's Ravager, because in my first video, I won't say that I made a mistake because the perks recommended are good. It is a perfectly fine video in the sense that you will come out with a very, very worthwhile weapon. However, there are a couple of caveats. So before we get into the perks, let's talk about the Storm King's Ravager in case anybody's watching this weapon brand new and somehow doesn't know what this is. The Storm King's Ravager is essentially, the Storm King's sword, and like many of the Storm King's weapons, it is essentially the best sword in the game. That can't really be disputed. It is the strongest sword in the entire game. There are special situations where the Spectral Blade with triple attack speed and stacking damage can technically be a higher DPS. However, that is only strictly speaking if you're ignoring the amazing ranged heavy attack of the Storm King's Ravager. Not only does it have a ranged heavy attack, which does 245% bonus damage on top of however much damage you were just dealing, eliminating a crowd of enemies from a distance, but also if you jump, you get the exact same lunging, arcing, swinging attack that the Spectral Blade offers. So it's essentially, technically weaker than the Spectral Blade, but really not. Now, there is one more final situation where the Storm King's Ravager being locked to energy and physical can be beat by a water Spectral Blade against fire enemies, but once again, if you're using that ranged weapon damage, it really adds a huge extra punch and is definitely something worthwhile. Like if you're ever going against a mini-boss, be sure that every 7 swings you're backing off and using that ability as much as possible because it will crit in the millions if you're in a good group of people, and that is a lot of extra damage. And of course, just for normal play, its attack speed is perfectly adequate. It's right on par with the normal other swords, and that leads into something that we've discovered. Now, we're going to talk about the loadout because it is extremely important to today's video. This is what I would consider to be a standard Paleoluna build. I would recommend supercharging her because the more health that Paleoluna has, the more damage she'll do because she gives you bonus damage based on your health, but I like to use a 130 copy just so that all of my older videos that existed before superchargers aren't immediately outdated. Just know that every bit of the gameplay you've been seeing would be better if I had been running Paleoluna, and all of the numbers would be higher with a 144 Paleoluna. Now, that out of the way, this is what I consider to be a standard build. There are really no other options when it comes to dinos right now. As of recording, the heroes might change in the future. Expect a video on that if that update comes along. Subscribe for that. But Saurian Vigor and Instinct, none of these really make as much sense as Saurian Focus. And like I mentioned, the heavy attacks are quite nice. Yes, plural. I love saying that because the Storm King's weapons are unique in that they have multiple heavy attack options, and it makes for a very fun experience. And regenerating 4 energy per second, depending on your shields being depleted, is a nice bonus from Saurian Focus. Now, another important one is anatomy lessons. Now, going coconuts and corrosive strikes are just nice to have. These are just what I like to use. It's a standard thing. You can use whatever you want. There are plenty of ninjas in the game that are great options, but upping our crit rating by 15 is very important. Now, the exact percent that you get from that varies. I'll show a chart on screen. You guys can do your own math. I'll link that Reddit link down below. It's quite nice, but Whiteout Fiona makes it so that we don't actually need a crit rating perk, and that will be important because of what I'm going to get into now. The major change. Now, in my older video, I recommended attack speed, crit rating, double crit damage, and I will argue this is perfectly fine. If you're not using Paleoluna, this is a weapon that I have perked up the way it is specifically because of smokescreen mini bosses. The Ravager is just the best pick. It's so strong. Again, like I said, with that heavy attack, every 7 shots, if you back off and send that wave of damage, it adds up a lot, and this is good if you're not running Luna. However, Luna is so overpowered that you might notice I have a 144 copy where triple attack speed is way stronger. Now, let me defend my point, and also let's do a little bit of math, shall we? So this is my favorite part of the video. You can skip this part if you don't care about the math and you just take my word for it, but let's get into it. So the Spectral Blade, for example, this 384k is with the attack speed ramped, like the extra damage per attack ramped all the way up, I think. So it comes just under the Ravager, but the health values might have been a little different. So that depends. These numbers are not relevant. We were doing something tricky, but this is where it stacks up. So with the amount of health that I showed you in my previous menu, and with the loadout that is considered to be a standard Paleoluna build, with triple attack speed, you are doing 408,000 damage per second, and that is, again, ignoring the heavy attack. With a crit build in Paleoluna, you're doing 345,000. You see why I was kind of antsy to remake this video? And by antsy, I mean not that motivated, because I found this out like a year ago when I did the Masamune video. Sorry about that. But I think a lot of people know this by now. I've been mentioning it a lot. But we're making it official in today's upload. So yeah, 345,000 is good. You've been using a good copy if you used my old video. But surprise, triple attack speed is way stronger and a lot more convenient to use. Because if you've ever noticed in game, just using a faster swinging sword is quite nice because you don't have to wait as long for the animation. The enemies are just kind of deader more quicker. Like a 0.4 swing speed means you're swinging, well, you know, 0.13 more often, which is a few more swings per second. And that is, it's just faster, it's quicker, it's cleaner, and it's a lot more convenient to use. And then, of course, down here is with Whiteout Fiona in the lead, because you said, you know, hey, wait, you don't need a crit rating perk with Whiteout Fiona in support. What if we put her in the lead and gave you triple crit damage? It's actually the lowest damaging of the group. It's unfortunate because, you know, having a 480% crit damage bonus is huge, and you're activating that more than half the time. Unfortunately, Paleoluna buffing your damage based on how fast you're swinging is just too powerful, and it makes it for the best option. Now, I've already basically talked about the best perks here, but I'm going to get into it just in case you want to perk it any other ways. And actually, I removed my data in the recording here, but let's bring this back on screen just for a quick second here, because I kind of ignored Totally Rockin' Out, which is absolutely the highest damage output you're going to be doing. Triple attack speed, or triple crit damage and attack speed with Totally Rockin' Out is the highest DPS. However, I don't like this for a couple of main reasons. One, when it comes to a melee, you're always in the action. You're always taking damage. This is why I use coconuts to keep that health as high as possible. And you're also, you know, you're never really going to be activating that bonus as much because you're always going to be losing your health. And if you're dead, your bonus is 0. And because of the way Totally Rockin' Out works, it's always fading away. So you're constantly losing that. You will never be at that 665,000 peak damage constantly. It's always going to be fading, and it's just kind of a risky way to play. But if you want maximum damage output, then yes, triple crit damage and attack speed is the way to go. And another topic to get into before I get into the perks is Bright Core or Sunbeam. This brings me to one of my favorite charts. This whole DPS calculator is something that I've intended to make a video on. It was invented, or set up at least, by my friend Cthulhu, going by Sael now, and she made all that, and it is very, very convenient. Honestly, all of the math that calculator does is essentially what I've been doing by hand ever before it was created, and it just does it automatically now. But this graph was also made by her, and this is the important part. So the top value is DPS 1, and you can tell by swing speed it is a little bit quicker. This is the Bright Core version, and on the bottom, the swing speed is a little bit slower, and that's because it's a Sunbeam copy. Now the red line is Sunbeam. You can see it's doing more damage every single time up until you have over 936,000 health. That is a very important value, meaning if you're using Paleoluna in the lead and you're running a Ravager, this was pre-superchargers, by the way, but it's still a good number to think of. Anytime you're in game using a Bright Core Ravager, the second you dip below 936,000 health, which will happen a lot in the heat of combat, you will be wishing that you had a Sunbeam copy. So whenever people ask me in the comments and I say Sunbeam always, I really do mean it. It's just better most of the time. I tried to use a Bright Core copy once, and like I said, you are losing out on that eensy beensy tiny bone. Look at this. Look at the difference between Bright Core and Sunbeam. 555,536 DPS with this health value compared to Sunbeam's 554,000. This is less than 1%, by the way. It is a negligible amount. Just use Sunbeam. The conversation, by my standards, is over. Always use Sunbeam on this. You might feel better swinging faster, but it is not. So, as for the perks, I already kind of talked about it. This is really, really standard. Crit rating, double crit damage. This is the best if you're not using Luna. Triple crit damage and attack speed if you're using Totally Rockin' Out. And then, of course, as the video is all centered around triple attack speed and crit damage is best under one circumstance. Now, crit damage, I didn't test this without Whiteout Fiona in support, so if you don't have her, then I guess you can put a damage perk there. At that point, the crit damage is just giving us a little bit of an extra bonus. The triple attack speed in Luna is where you're getting all your damage, and remember, the damage is coming from the amount of health you have, so something like coconuts is essentially required. You need to have coconuts. Survivalist is not fast enough. Campfires might be fast enough. Healing pads will definitely help a lot, but eating coconuts and making sure that your health is topped off, all the while getting a 16% damage bonus, is a really good way to make sure that you're always doing the peak amount of damage. So there are, other ways to heal yourself, but that's the only way that you're going to keep up that damage output, because again, when you're swinging really, really fast and basing all of your damage off of Luna, if you have like 200,000 health remaining, you are definitely going to be performing worse than a crit build. So be sure to be healthy. And of course, that bottom perk. So Whiteout Fiona in support, bringing it up to 32.5% makes crit damage the best option here. But you can do whatever you want. You don't need crit rating at this point if you're not running crit damage. Damage is nice. It's a convenient way to round it out. And damage to miss monsters and bosses, if you're using this exclusively for a mini boss, could be nice, but I don't know why you would do that, because this is a weapon that is perfectly good to be used all around. As for the element, I think energy is just the best all around. If you are specifically saving multiple copies of this for like mini boss situations, then sure. If you have a mini boss without an element, physical will definitely be stronger. And if you're one of those people who wants to have like 3 or 4 copies of the Ravager leveled up, then you can go for that. It's definitely a weapon you can farm. I've got 2 more copies myself just sitting here, and I don't even run Storm King anymore. So there are plenty of different ways you can run this for totally rocking out, normal crit build, Paleo Luna attack speed, maybe a physical copy for a mini boss. I just counted 4 things on my fingers, and however way suits your playstyle is the way you should go. And without further ado, I think I'm going to call it. If you guys want to support this channel, feel free to use code Mista at your checkout. If you guys want to let me know which Storm King weapon I should finish or update next, I would love to hear from you guys, because the Storm King Scourge and the Fury are 2 videos that I did make mistakes on. It's like this one where they weren't really vital. It's why I'm starting with the Ravager. This was the only one that really needed to be done, but I would be interested in recovering those, and I think we all wouldn't mind a second look at the Wrath. So comment down below, and yeah, I'll see you guys next time. And then